Hey, Comics Cubers, welcome back to the Comics Cube. I really hope that you guys are enjoying the new content we're putting out, and I hope you're looking forward to more, be they interviews or retrospectives or read alongs. If you would like to support the Comics Cube further than watching it, then please consider donating to our Patreon. There is only one tier, it is $1 a month. So basically, think of it as a tip jar if you enjoy the content that we're putting out. It's basically just there to help keep the Comics Cube going. Our guest today is Hans Dimapilis, who wrote and drew a graphic memoir called On Being Quiet and debuted at the Philippine International Comics Festival back in July of 2024, where I had the pleasure of interviewing her for her launch. However, by the time it was time to launch, she had already sold out. So think of that for a bit. In this interview, she will give her thoughts on her graphic memoir, on comics, and on her process. So please come join us. I reached out to you because I interviewed you at the Philippine International Comics Festival for your comic On Being Quiet, which I know I mentioned this a few times at the festival when I was interviewing you, but the festival took place on Saturday and Sunday, July 20 to 21. You finished the comic on July 18 of 2024, and then you launched it on July 21st in the afternoon, but you sold out of it on July 21st in the morning. So that seems really successful to me. Can you tell us? My first question that I ask everyone is this: why do you love comics?
Oh, whoa, we're starting there. It was like, oh, that made me like, oh, wait, that's a very good question. Oh, and frankly speaking, I'm having a bit of a difficult time articulating it. But honestly, I can't properly explain it right now. I just do. Is that like a good is that like a good answer? I'm kind of like wondering if that's a good answer or not. But in general, I just really love this medium that allows me to like experiment and mix both pictures and text.
Mm-hmm.
And I also like how it's so limited depending on its form because it's kind of because when you think about it, it's the limitations that kind of like force you to think outside the box.
Yes.
So when you're limited inside a page, for example, an A5 page, and you think, "Oh, okay, I'm going to put boxes. But what if you want to like experiment beyond just illustrating boxes? So you kind of like go with floating panels, insert panels, so that sort of thing. So yeah, I like how in terms of storytelling, I can mix pictures and words. I can also offer no words, and I also like how in its limitations, I'm kind of like forced to experiment and how I can illustrate things visually.
Do you remember the first comic that you had or you read? Or at the very least, the first one that you fell in love with?
Oh, first comic. That's it made me really think. First comic that I fell in love with, I'd have to say Calvin and Hobbes. Yeah. Yeah, so we had this like old copy of the 10th anniversary collection.
Yeah.
And I just remember being so enamored with the way Bill Watterson illustrated these two characters. And I honestly remember thinking, oh wow, I also want to do that. And then shortly after, I read Bone by Jeff Smith,
Yeah.
the graphic novel series. Yeah, it's so much fun to read, right? And I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is so great. I really wanted to read more because as a child I didn't have access to comics. I grew up overseas in Saudi. So
Okay.
the our access to computers were very limited. And usually we don't have access to like usually the usual paperback books, the adventure books, Percy Jackson books, that sort of thing. But in terms of comics, there at least during my time there weren't a lot of manga, that sort of thing. So it was really only in college when I came back here that I was able to like access them, So yeah, so the first one was Calvin Hobbes by Bill Watterson, and then uh the Bone series by Jeff Smith. So I remember reading that. I was like kind of like mind blown that, oh, this is possible. This is so much fun to read. Yeah. But yeah,
I,
those are like the first books that like got me into reading them. Uh the books that got into making them though are like a different set of books.
well, I was gonna say, I mean, Bill Watterson would probably be happy to hear that because Calvin and Hobbes is a
Oh,
testament to the imagination. But
yes,
like
yes.
the way that you have Calvin's dream sequences, and all of a sudden his dreams
Oh,
are drawn super realistic.
oh,
But the comics that got you into making them, what are they?
oh. I think the for me, my entry point into Filipino comics was Light by Rob Cham.
Mm-hmm.
There was like Adarna was doing this like book caravan thing wherein they had like set up a small shop in our college. So that was like my first exposure to Filipino books. So and then I saw Rob Cham's work Light. So and I really loved it. But the book that really got me into making them was Mythology Class by Arnold Are.
Or there, yeah.
Then I shortly found afterward Elmer by,
With Jerry Alangilan.
oh my gosh, wait, with Jerry Alangilan. And then I think my ultimate really was Dead Balagtas, so by Emiliana Capilan. And then
Mga
that
sayaw sa dagat at
trinity of,
lupa.
yes, so that trinity of comics really pushed me, encouraged me to think, oh wow, so this is what Filipino creators can do.
Mm-hmm.
This is what Filipino comics creativity looks like. And I was really encouraged to like go ahead and try to, to create my stories, write my own stories. I still read them
Yeah.
and look at them when I'm looking for inspiration. But yeah, I thank those three creators so much. RIP to Sir Jerry.
I remember the first time I read that Balagtas Toma 1, Mga Sayaw sa Dagat at Lupa. And I put it down and I legitimately thought the words, this is one of the greatest comics I have ever read. Not one of the
Yes.
greatest Filipino comics, not one of the greatest like comics made by a woman.
Yes.
This
Just
is one of the greatest Filipino. This is one of the greatest comics I have ever read. Period.
yes, yes, I agree. I agree.
Is there a specific chapter in Dead Balagtas that you were particularly inspired by?
Chapter one, of course.
That's
it's
what
like
I thought. That's the one I
that
thought.
opening scene wherein the old maiden was chanting. It's like just that opening scene. Each time you flip the page, and it's like each turn of the page is again mind blown. Again, I'm having a difficult time just describing or like remember like how I felt remembering when I first read it. But I really thought, oh wow, so I can do this. It's like when you see someone actually do something that you haven't seen before, it makes you like realize, oh wait, so this is what is possible with this medium.
Yes.
Wait, you can do this one? I love it. Yeah.
Landscape, double page spreads. Did you see her on day one of Peak Off?
Yes, yes, I had my book signed. I was able to have my book signed. I think I remember you saying you weren't able to like check her works, I think.
No,
But
I said that I during the Giggle panel where she was, I was downstairs getting coffee because I was prepping for the next segment. And then but my girlfriend was at the Giggle panel. And then after that she told me that Dead Balagtas was there and I went like, Dead Balagtas was here? And you did.
oh,
And I
yeah,
didn't
but
know.
oh, you weren't able to go there to their booth afterward because I know that she stayed around for a bit for signing in their booth.
No. Like,
Oh,
no, I didn't see
no.
her. It was
Oh
really
no.
frustrating.
And she's such a rare Pokemon too, so
I was gonna say that Balagtas Toma 1 is also the greatest comic I have ever read, drawn by somebody in a mask. So, so at Peak Off, you launched On Being Quiet, which is autobiographical. It's actually on your background behind you. And can you tell us what it is about?
So On Being Quiet is I mean, I call it a graphic memoir one shot. So it's a standalone piece where you can read it. And again, it's non-fic. It's a graphic memoir, so it's based on my experience. The one shot essentially uh tries to tackle and explore what the word quiet means and how this specific word has changed, how the meaning of this word has changed for me over time after some recent experiences. So yeah, so that's essentially what On Being Quiet is about. It's just an exploration of a concept and how, I mean, I can't say I've come to terms with it, but again, as the hashtag on my work post, it's still a work in process, it's still processing.
The incidents that led to you making On Being Quiet are fairly well documented in public, and we will not be discussing them here. So anybody who wanted to tune into the show for gossip, well, bahala na kayo. You're not getting it. Um, but I wanted to talk to you about the process that you made for On Being Quiet, because it is a very, again, I mean, as we were talking about with Dead Balagtas, it does not look like things that you see in a lot of Filipino comics. Actually, it doesn't really look like a lot of things that you see in comics in general. So what led you to take on to for with what led you to make the creative choices that would give the book this look, this particular ephemeral look?
For the concept of doors, um, because I was really trying to I was really wondering how I could visualize the idea of exploring different ideas.
Mhm.
Um, Honestly, at one point, I was thinking of like drawing people, and then I realized, oh wait, I don't think I have enough enough time for that. But then
Constraints are what lead to the final product. Go on. Sorry.
yeah, that's a very good observation. I do think that when you have like limitations, like especially time limits in place, you're kind of like forced to think, oh wait, how can I like sort of bypass this particular hurdle? I think though, like looking back now, when I was like thinking of this, I think that subconsciously I was drawing inspiration from Lucia Azul's work called Lucia Dreaming.
Mhm.
The first work there, it's called Candles. The first story there, Candles. It's about this girl going through a hallway of doors. So so I reread it recently. Then it sort of like came to me that oh wait, I think I may have like subconsciously drawn inspiration from this piece, which led me to the idea of like using doors also for my work. But yeah, that's how I came with the idea of doors. As for the ephemeral look, I'll be honest, it was a product of constraints. Uh, I just wanted to like really color it as quickly as possible. So I thought, oh wait, what's like the easiest way I can go about this? Okay, let's just put them in a void. So I don't have to like draw too many backgrounds. For context, I love drawing backgrounds. If you check like the first work of Spirit Sprints or my other illustrations, I do love drawing them, but they take so much time to draw. So considering the time constraints, you know what? I'll just go for this look instead. So minimal, and I think it also helps focus on the character and the words that are spread on the page. A lot of things, a lot of ideas actually happened. How do I say this? A lot of the concepts or the things in the comic actually popped up as I was coloring the piece, or I was like drawing the piece. It was a very weird process where I was just essentially how do I say this?
You were discovering it as
What's
you
the
were going along.
that's yeah, that's like a fair way to describe it. It's like what do you call it? Like ad-libbing?
Improvising.
Yeah, there, that's the right word. But I was essentially improvising the story, the art as I go about it. But honestly, at that time, I was really just thinking, you know what, I have to finish this. So all the shortcuts I learned from my previous experiences of drawing comics, I applied them here. Honestly, I still don't know how I managed to finish that. And I'm very and I'm very thankful to the people who helped me, my flatters. So that's
Mhm.
Sampay and friend of mine, Ate Pat. So thank you guys. Thank you for taking on this very rush work.
Flatting is hard. It's
Yes,
hard.
it is. Yes, I've also done flatting a couple of times, so I'm aware it's difficult work.
I'll tell you something else that impressed me about on being quiet. So a page like this, that almost looks like one panel, but it's
Mm.
really three. That always makes me that always impresses me because one, it looks great, but two, it always feels like you were able to save time.
Yeah, that's fair.
The other thing is, I'm also looking at it right now, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of comics, uh, the lettering could use some work.
Yes.
But in your case, the lettering is, it's legible, it's clear, it works great with the pictures, but also in something like this, it is part of the art. You treat the lettering as part of the art, and I think that is a mentality that isn't really that widespread. What would you have to say about that?
For lettering, I think it was because it was one of the things that really struck me when I was starting to learn about comics. For context, when I was just starting out in making comics, I really wasn't sure on where to start. And that's kind of like where finding a community falls into place because the first then I saw Comic Con posted this program that they had. I think uh, I forgot like the word for it. They had this like comics workshop
Comics
wherein you
create.
can yeah, comics create.
Yeah.
So I signed up for that one because I was desperate at that point to learn about comics. And um Sir John was actually the one who kind of like really um planted in my mind that it's important for the lettering to flow well within a page. And I think what he specifically said was, if your readers forget about the letter or they don't they're not like startled by it or anything, then you have properly done your job.
Yes.
So that's general mindset when it comes to lettering. Like, okay, it has to flow properly within a page. I have to think about it carefully. I have to be intentional regards to where I place it, the font that I use. So until now, when I'm doing my personal projects, my comics, that's something that I keep with me in mind, especially when I'm doing lettering works. In many ways, I feel like lettering is also one of those jobs that I try to improve more.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I did work on the lettering for Katipunera Warrior as well. So yeah, in terms of like lettering, I do try to keep it in mind to like always be to keep it more polished so that it works well within the image, within the pages of a comic.
That's a shout out to John Zamar, one of the
Yes.
pillars
Yes.
of the local comics community. How about color? Like, I'm looking at this page right here. So in addition to just color, but like obviously that is you sitting in a chair. How do you come up with your composition and your color choices?
In terms of color, hmm,
Like, do you have a background like in that kind of thing, talaga?
no, for I think this was mentioned before in the panel in Pico. I didn't finish art, so it was something that I kind of had to like teach myself over the years. Oh, funny story in terms of like this is like very much inserted. I actually like failed to get into art school. I still remember that. So
Not
and
that you're bitter
I
or anything.
like no, I tried to shift into our university's art school. I failed. But I really remember during that time that I was really like going to work into improving my art. I don't know. I hope little Hans is happy where she is now. But yeah. In terms of coloring, I just take a lot of inspiration from other artists' work. In terms of wait, I'm trying to think of like in terms of local artists because I prefer I think
Well,
in general I try to go for like I try to adjust the colors in regards to the work. So, but in general, I find myself leaning more toward brighter colors in my
Yeah.
pieces.
Did
So at least that makes that for me that makes sense to me.
you have any
Yeah,
comics that influence the way you look at color? I know it's hard to pick local comics because most local comics are in black and white.
black and white. Yes, it's a bit difficult.
I mean,
In
you don't
Diy
have
Tano.
to mention comics. I once interviewed somebody who said she was influenced by the colors of Kingdom Hearts, the video game.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. In terms of coloring, I would have to say that chapter one of Dead Balagtas, that specific chapter, that really,
I,
it was such an influential story
it's
for me as
so
a
good.
character.
It's so good.
Oh gosh, so happy. Yeah. So, definitely, chapter one of Dead Balagtas, and terms of color, I would have to say Studio Ghibli movies. I really like how they are colored in general.
Hmm.
Very bright, airy, but also,
But
how do I
also
say, very
quiet.
grounded.
Yeah,
Yes. It has
yeah.
like a very grounded, which I really like. But in
Uh,
general, I do try to experiment in terms of color.
before we go on, I know that you have something that you can present regarding how you made On Being Quiet. I just want to give you a shout out for this double page spread right here because one, it looks great. Two, it showcases your use of color, and three, saves time.
Yes, same. That's how we do this. Whatever works in the time limit. All right.
But you know what doesn't look
Gosh,
like it saves time? This one, directly right before it. So it's like it balances
uh,
out.
yeah. It's like, no, I think if I remember correctly, I do think it was an intentional choice wherein everything before that specific part is supposed to be like dark, moody, bold colors. And then that specifically for that segment in the story, I intentionally used like lighter colors, so pastel, brighter, because I mean I was hoping it could feel like a more empowering moment.
Mhm.
So yeah, I deliberately switched the colors in that specific one.
And
Deliberate,
you had a presentation during Peak Off, and it'd be great to immortalize that on my channel right now.
right? Wait, okay, so on being quiet, processing experiences through comics. So this is a very short presentation I made for the comics panel for Pickoff, and it's essentially it's like a very short guide on how you can on like how you process your own experiences through the comics medium. So in general, I do think that experiences are very messy because usually there's this saying wherein you can only sort of like get clarification when you look behind on things, and I think that applies when it comes to our experiences in life in general. And it gets quite messy when the experience is quite it's very, how to say this, emotionally ridden. Yes. So and when we are going through a lot of things, it's difficult to get a clear sort of like a clear understanding of what's happening, and you're still sort of like still growing through the process. So and comics as one of our most popular art forms, I do think is a way for us to help sort of sort through that clutter and help us understand those experiences more. So for me, On Being Quiet was a way for me to process my own experiences, wherein I had the thoughts and sort of like moments that are sort of images that were stuck in my mind. I was able to sort of organize them in a way on a page. And I think since I already knew beforehand that I was going to be not just writing this for myself, because it's so easy to sort of like just word vomit or just draw whatever you like. But since I was going to be showing this to specifically a reader, I had to be systematic with the way that I approached with telling my story. So in a way, I was sort of like I wouldn't say forced, but how do I say this? Like significantly encouraged to make sure that all right, I have to like be systematic with the way that I lay down ideas and sort of arrange the images visually. So arrange images in a way that is not only sort of not only makes that it's not only like logical or like okay this makes sense when you read it, but it is also impactful. So I think that's one of the great ways that you can do with comics is since you're working with two things essentially, right? Just images and words. You have a lot of room for playing on how you can sort of like maximize the advantages of each element, I guess, each
Yeah.
element, so image and text, in a way that sort of like maximizes not only like in a literal sense but also in a visual sense. Okay, so that is for this part. Okay, so I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I can give for people who want to like explore this kind of like comics making. I
You
do
know
have a
more
couple.
than the people who haven't made one.
I mean, whew, it's very much a learning journey for creators, honestly. Okay, so or tip number one, I would for people who are just whether you're just starting out or you're just thinking of venturing to this kind of work, honestly for any kind of comics, it's very helpful to think visually.
Hmm.
In my case, I always um the very common way I say it is that I'm thinking of like I'm watching a movie in my mind and I'm essentially arranging those images on a page. That's kind of like how I imagine. So it's kind of like how I would explain the sentence thinking visually. So imagine that you're putting an image in your mind. I mean, you're watching a movie in your mind, and then you're carefully laying them out on a page. Yeah. So that's it is for thinking visually, and I think it also helps when you try to explore the idea of a particular concept. So, for example, with the word quiet, I first related it to doors, and then I related it to a space. I mean, sorry, if you like, I feel like I should have edited this presentation now that I think about it. But yeah, so
It's okay.
the
Don't
word
worry about it.
quiet was first like to a door, and then it was related to a specific place, the room, and then it's sort of like starts relating to a state of mind by the end of the comic. So there's like again, it's like a sort of like exploration, and it's very good to connect to concretize an idea by connecting them to specific things, something that people can easily relate with. So that's what I would encourage when you're making comics. So to make sure to think visual, right? So again, so as an example, it's like some text from my comics. So the first one is it's where I thrive, where I can focus and make art and just be me. The second one is the thing is you see some things lurk around in the quiet, and as somebody who tends to keep to herself, I'm often quite oblivious to them. So for the first part, I wanted to incorporate a very light feeling. So for this particular part, so I instead of like thinking of it as just light, I decided to go with more of like she's floating, my character's like floating through the panels. So it does incorporate that sense of like lightness wherein you feel free, you feel very much freed from the constraints and free to explore things. So the character is literally floating throughout the panels. Yes. And then for the second part, uh, I wanted to incorporate a more ominous feeling. So it's very dark, and to make it feel a bit more sinister, um, I adjusted aside from adjusting the colors. I also used the top shot to show that some things like literally lurking underneath in the background, because for the most part during this time it was mostly very bright, very colorful, and the tone shifts when it comes to this particular page. Yes.
Hmm.
Okay, so tip number two, translate the emotion to the page. As I stated in my previous example, there are ways that you can sort of like concretize a feeling into a page. So for example, again, in this particular part, in the first page, I wanted to incorporate a very freeing kind of feeling. So that's what I did with my character. I literally removed her from the panel so that she can feel like she's floating. Okay. Wait. So I did. Oh, okay. So I placed an example here. Okay. So for this particular spread, I wanted it to feel overwhelming. I think that's the word that I would use for it. So it very much a time wherein wherein the characters not only discovering things, but wherein she's just like she's the one intentionally looking for them. But the thing is, the information is coming to her essentially. So it was, and to sort of like cur- to essentially like illustrate that feeling of overwhelming, I essentially decided to like break off all sort of like structure for this page. Like everything is like literally scattered so that people are like forced to go through each the readers essentially like forced to go through each panel, and sort of like also aside from like forced to go through each panel, when you flip the page, it's like so many things are happening at once, so that that feeling of overwhelmingness could also be translated to the reader.
Right.
Right. Okay. And then tip number three, this is for again for in terms of like people who are writing, who are based off of their experience or processing their emotions. Don't be afraid to explore beyond. Um, and I'm saying this as someone who's kind of like also like processing, to also try to look to, because when you're, how do you say this? It's like when you're going through something, it's so easy to just look at what in front of you and sort of like kind of like forget everything else. But when you're like writing something, or like when you're creating something, you have a safe space to sort of like go how to say, explore your thoughts, and also kind of like, how do you say this,
So
find some
yeah.
like idea to process, like wait, what is like, what can I like get from this experience, like what can I learn, at least for me. um Whenever I'm going through something, I do like to frame it in the idea, okay, so what have I learned from all of this? And then even if while I'm going through something, is there something that I can glean from this whole experience? So for me, so for that in that particular phase of my journey, that's when I decided to like remove all sort of like paneling, specifically for this particular spread, because I wanted the thoughts to feel more flowing. Because technically this is like the part of the comic wherein I just essentially realized that there are no clear answers yet. So
Mhm.
literally the characters floating through limbo. But there's, at least for me, I also, in general, when I make my works, I always want to like end on a more hopeful note. So even when she's like floating through limbo, it still feels like warm. It's still, and I still opted for like a more hopeful kind of like visual, in terms of like visual language, there's like flowers, and it still feels warm. Like she still feels hopeful about um her current situation. Yes. Okay, and that's essentially it. I hope that for people who are viewing this, I hope you were able to like get some ideas on how you can apply it to your own works. And thank you so much for tuning into this very short presentation. Yes.
That's great. That's great. Um, Craig Thompson, most famous for blankets, but also famous for other stuff like Habibi, once told me that he believes comics are better than any other medium when it comes to autobiographical personal things,
Oh yes.
because the way that memory works is most like a comic.
Oh, that's the first time I've heard of that. I have to look for that.
It's because everything is more fragmented and all over the place, as opposed to like a
Oh, yeah.
book, right? Like a book is straightforward, a movie straightforward.
Mm.
So I'm really glad that regardless of what happened, I'm really glad that you're okay and that you're continuing on making comics. On Being Quiet is an astounding personal work, and that is grounded and takes place mostly in the person's mind. However, throughout the course of this whole interview, there have been two images behind you, and we've only talked about one. And I believe Gemma and the Giant Owl is a part of the 2025 official Peacock selection.
And yeah. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't know how much more you can tell me about it, but how much more can you tell me about it?
I can I can say that it's a work in development, that's for sure. Because from what I know, it's still about to go through a workshop process. But my general idea towards making this comic was that I really just wanted to make a comics for kids.
Mhm.
I've said this like numerous times before in interviews that I've attended, is that I find it so weird that in Philippine comics, I mean, in general, at least for like the general readership in the Philippines, comics is kind of um I would I mean, this is like more like a more extreme version of sin, but it's like it's a bit looked down upon by people because the general idea is, oh, it's comics, it has pictures, so it has to be for kids, right? And that's kind of like how people generally look at the medium. However, if the comics is like for kids, I find it so weird, at least in the comics that I've read, that there's actually not a lot of comics for kids. So, and that disconnect has kind of like it has like, how to say this? It has confused me for a while. Like it doesn't make sense that you say in a, okay, this specific medium is childish, but there's actually not a lot of works cater that
Yes.
specific demographic. So I thought, you know what? I want to change that. Well, sure. So I want to change that. So, one of my main advocacies right now is just like creating more comics for children because if you think about it, they are like one of the first readers. You know, you can inculcate that love of
Yeah.
reading at a young age. And if you want to grow your readership, you know, why not start with the people who are just starting to read? So yeah. So that was my idea when for this book. I wanted like a fun uh a fun graphic novel that's, you know, that caters to children, but while it does cater to children, it does not lack in depth. So that's my goal. So which I hopefully I can reach.
To wrap that up, I will say that my go-to recommendation whenever somebody says recommend me a comic, the safest recommendation, any age group, any gender, any whatever, is Jeff Smith's Bone.
Yes. I love that.
Right? Because it works for everything. And you could
Yes,
see it as a
yes.
kid's comic and you could not see it as a kid's comic. So yeah, like I think you're absolutely right. I think that despite the fact that we look down on comics, or the society looks down on comics, um, maybe as a community we also like push a little bit too hard and say, okay, then we won't make comics for kids.
I
Glad
think
that you're
I
making it.
think it's I think it's less about that. In general, it's more of like um there are people who make comics are usually either teenagers or like adults, right?
Mhm.
So or young adults in general. And for us, we of course we want to write the kind of stories that we love to read. So maybe the themes that those books explore are more, you know, they're not technically geared toward kids because when you're writing for kids, it is a bit more intentional because you have to think about your demographic a little bit more and not just the kids themselves, but also like the parents. So
Yeah.
the schools. There's like a lot of things you have to like consider when you're writing for children.
Is it safe
But
for
yeah, but
kids?
I do, yeah, it's usually something that people have to like think about when you're writing for children. But I'm super happy that there are like a lot more creators currently who are exploring comics for children. So there's Patty Ramos, there's Dion Kong.
Mhm.
So and of course there's you know, what Cat S,
Yeah,
the
Little
one
Wolf.
the one from Comic Cat. She has works in Comic Cat. So like more, yes, more comics for children, please. Yes. I'm
Yes.
not I think even wait, what's the name? Yeah, I think even School Run also falls under that category. I think it's just a lot of fun to read when I read it.
Congratulations on being a part of the 2025 Peak of Selection. I'm very happy for you. And I hope we can talk about Gemma and the Giant Owl when you have more details, when you can, when it's about to be released. Thank you so much,
Hopefully I can
Hans.
finish it in time. Okay.
You
Thank
will.
you.
Thank you so much. You finished this in time. You
I
can do
still
that
don't know how I
again.
was able. Ah, but yeah, we
Congratulations.
shall strive. Thank you. Thank you again.